ambulance, please. He's bleeding. He's going to be dying. Oh my God.
Sunday, 15th of January, 2023. Residents of this Huddersfield neighbourhood are waking up to an unexpected scene. Last night, at around 11:30, a 33-year-old man was stabbed in his home by unknown assailants.
I've been called out to an attempted murder scene in Huddersfield where a male has been stabbed in the abdomen. His wife and 3 children were at the home address when this happened, and his wife has stated that there's been a knock at the rear door, she's heard a commotion in the kitchen, and then a male has appeared in the living room and said, if you give me your phone, you won't get hurt. So she's given a mobile phone to the suspect, who's then left via the back door, which is the way they came in, and gone. And when she's gone into the kitchen, she's seen that her husband has been stabbed in the stomach, and she's ran to her neighbours to call for help.
Scene investigators are focusing on the house where the stabbing took place. They're examining inside the property, the backyard, and the front garden where the victim collapsed.
Neighbours have brought out blankets and cushions to try and look after him until paramedics arrive. On the way to hospital, he has gone into cardiac arrest. He's been given CPR. They have managed to get him back with a faint pulse, and he has been operated on in hospital, but his prognosis is still not good.
Now, crime scene manager Jasmine White and her team must look for evidence to try and piece together exactly what happened.
It's not like there's been a lot of disturbance, is it really, apart from the
No.
crockery?
There's not much visually.
One broken plate, one broken pint glass, and is that what we got?
Yeah, that's it, isn't
That's
it?
an ashtray, isn't it? Did you think there had been 3 people in then?
We know that one person has. Anybody else, don't know.
It's proving a challenging scene to process.
There's hardly any blood in there. It's literally like, it's not like blood spatters or anything, so it's like probably a single stab. But all we've seen is this, isn't it? And maybe that might be dried blood that's like curled up. This person's got a really nasty stab wound to the abdomen, so much so that their internal organs were protruding out of it when they were found by paramedics. But we've only found 3 or 4 spots of blood at the address. So that would lead me to believe that his blood loss is internal, and that's why it's not at the address.
They test a small amount of what could be blood on the lounge floor.
What I'm thinking is if we could photograph it where it is,
Yeah.
with an arrow,
Yeah.
test it, and then swab it.
It's positive for blood. It may or may not belong to the suspect. We know that the victim's injured, but we don't know if the suspects have any injuries. So I'm going to take a swab from here, and it's known that the suspect has been in this room.
They're the only bits of blood we can see. We've not seen any on this door coming from the kitchen into the living room. We've not seen any blood on the external door into the kitchen. There's just very little blood in the premises at all.
The CSI team examines the kitchen floor. Any footwear marks could identify the attackers.
I don't know.
I just feel like it's the only thing you'd get. So if we didn't just roll an Esler here,
Yeah.
it'd be... I feel like that's a fair thing to do.
It is just this area here, isn't it, I suppose, to start with.
What's on? Is there some that stood up? No. Just
Is there what they can do with it chemical enhancement-wise?
it's either take it up and send it off, or try powder it.
Outside, A specialist search team is looking for the murder weapon.
We're searching the streets and surrounding areas for any items that may have been discarded by the suspects. We're going to be searching all streets, all pavements, all gardens, all bins, all open areas, all drains, anywhere where any item could have been discarded or concealed. To understand the significance of the items that we are either looking for or we come across, which may become more relevant as time goes on. We're less than 24 hours after this incident, so the search teams that have been briefed will be keeping an open mind and looking for anything that's out of place that can help the investigation team.
More gloves inside the bottom of this tyre.
While forensics remain at the crime scene, detectives are trying to establish a motive for such a vicious and violent attack.
I've got to consider whether we were looking at an actual targeted attack, a random attack, or even a burglary gone wrong, or potentially mistaken identity and they picked the wrong address. And I've got to establish, through hypotheses, which one of those is the correct course of action and what's the motive for this offence. Identifying a suspect early doors will allow me to do that, and that's where the forensic side comes in.
Meanwhile, a man's life hangs in the balance.
He has had 21 blood transfusions and is still classed as really poorly and could die. It's likely it will become a murder inquiry.
It's the day after an attempted murder in Huddersfield. Forensic teams are retrieving evidence from the crime scene, knowing the 33-year-old victim is unlikely to survive.
So far, the search team have found a number of latex gloves on the route we think the suspects have taken. They've found a knife here in the bush. Whether it's the knife we're interested in or not, it's still good to me that the search team are finding the items to show that they're searching properly, they're doing what is required, and we'll just keep going until we're satisfied the scene's done.
Well, that bit pushes all the way up, mate, outside.
I'm just thought I'd bring it to your attention. In relation to the latex gloves, right, you two. Right. There's a glove here somewhere, and there's a glove under this BMW.
Okay.
So there are two more gloves.
Inside the house, CSIs are working through where the suspects might have walked and what they might have touched.
The back door being open?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so it's insecure. So
Yeah.
they've just walked in.
No, they've knocked.
Oh, right, okay.
She's heard a knock
Yeah.
at 11:30 at night. Then next thing she's known, she's heard a commotion. So whether they've knocked and pushed the way in, knocked, he's let them in. One person she's seen's been in.
Yeah.
In this case, as it stands at the moment, because we've got no idea who the suspects are, we're going to try absolutely everything at the scene. It's quite limited because the contact that the suspects had with surfaces at the scene, the victim, that seems to have been over quite quickly, according to the female witness. So we're trying to think of anything that we could look at to find the suspect or get a link to the suspect. We're going to be swabbing the inside of the kitchen door handle. That's for cellular DNA, in case the suspects touch that on their way out of the house. Obviously, he's gone through there and there's no handle.
Yeah. What, powder in the old lot?
Well, we could try, yeah. The witness has stated that that suspect may have been wearing gloves, so there may be no chance of getting DNA on that door handle, but we have to try now, otherwise that chance is gone. We're going to be looking at the kitchen floor and the living room floor for footwear using something called ESLA, which is electrostatic lifting apparatus. It's not something we use often, but it does lift the dust that's been disturbed on more shiny surfaces. We pass an electrical current through a very thin black gel with a metal backing. Look at that. And it literally sucks to the floor and lifts any dust that's been disturbed on the floor. So we've preserved the floor using stepping plates. So we're hoping that if there's any footprints from the suspects, we may be able to get them with this. If not, it's a non-destructive technique, and then we can move to powdering the floor and see if that works.
I'm just powdering outside of this door for any potential fingerprints or footwear marks. It is slightly damp in places, which makes it really difficult to actually powder. But with the information with the suspects sort of wearing gloves, not looking for glove marks, I'm looking for any sort of marks, whether it's latex marks or even fingerprints, but I'm not seeing a great deal on here, unfortunately. And there don't appear to be any footwear marks either, just in case they are, the suspect could have kicked the door.
Sadly, it doesn't look like it's lifted anything, but it's a really useful technique to try because it is non-destructive, so we've not harmed anything by doing it. Tomorrow, a CSI is going to have to come back and we're going to try and powder this floor and the floor in the living room.
Overnight, the victim's condition significantly worsens.
Sadly, our victim, Kalfan Seif, passed away at 19:52 hours last evening at HRI, so we are now in the throes of a murder inquiry.
Kalfan Seif was a husband and father of 3. He was just 33 years old. The identity of his killers and their motive is unknown.
The offenders were caught on CCTV, and at 23:07 hours we can see 3 suspects, which we believe are males, walking into the rear of the actual attacked premises. 2 are on foot, 1 is on a push bike, and 1 we can say is in possession of an umbrella.
And the lad that seems to be riding the bike on both occasions, before and after, is a lad wearing grey jogging bottoms. And that bike is dropped beyond the scene, isn't it? So further up the hill.
At 23:14 hours, we get all 3 suspects running away on foot, so none of them on a bike.
And that's all we are. I mean, we haven't got them anywhere else. We need to concentrate on tracking and tracing from.
The bike, which was discarded in the alleyway behind the victim's house, has been recovered. It could become a key piece of forensic evidence.
Once the bike and umbrella had been located by officers, that they seemed a little bit out of place. They were very close to the scene. So I was contacted and deployed CSI straight out to them to see if we can glean some forensic evidence and also to preserve them because it was raining. And I've asked them to complete some DNA sampling of the handlebar grips and also on the saddle of the bike and fingerprint it. This is the black umbrella that was found next to the bike, and CSI were tasked with, again, obtaining DNA samples from it.
Also found in the alleyway was a mobile phone and a pair of purple latex gloves.
The victim's wife states during the incident that one of the offenders was wearing purple latex gloves, and she'd also had her mobile phone stolen during the incident. So it's possible that these latex gloves have been discarded by the offenders as they've been fleeing the scene. The umbrella and the purple gloves, I think they'd be items that would be suitable for fast-track DNA submission. Excellent. In order to try and identify your suspects. The bike, we're not sure if it's perhaps been stolen in a defence, it belongs to somebody else. Have all 3 of the suspects perhaps ridden the bike at some point during that day or prior to the offence? So my concern with the bike handles and the seat was that the potential of getting a mixed profile was greater, and that wouldn't necessarily have been suitable for loading to the database to get you a name.
It's not going to give me that quick hit that I'm looking for.
Probably today, I think, given now that we're dealing with a murder inquiry and thinking long term when it gets to court, that we should get imaging done. I also think some drone footage from above, so that you'll be able to.
You can get the plan. That's the address. That's where the bike was covered.
Yeah. They can do some specialist photography which will encompass the entire scene, a 360 view of the interior and exterior of the property, and some drone footage that will assist showing the offender's route from the scene.
Hiya, Sarge. Yes, we've got an item here which could be blood, might not be, and we know the suspects have been rooting around in these bushes.
Just down the road, the specialist search team has a new area to investigate after a CCTV breakthrough.
We just seize and secure for now, including that item there as and when we get a chance. Is that all right? I believe the suspects involved in this incident have run behind me along this path, and the green area, the overgrowth to that side is of interest to us. So we've put a scene on here, and we are putting steps in place now to try and get our teams to be able to search this as a matter of priority.
What have you found so far?
So far today, we've found more gloves. We've just found a tea towel just over there which has got red staining on it. It's something we can't dismiss without further examination. There's 3 blister packs of tablets that all look fresh and out of place. Maybe something to do with this, maybe not. But we'll probably take them anyway, and anything else we find here, Cat.
We've got CCTV on the right and the left from both premises, and the premises up the road up there, so we've got 3 angles covered, so our next plan is to go across the road, over the bridge.
So if you get anything significant, if you feed that back into me, I'll literally follow you. Wherever the suspects go, I'll follow you with the scene.
We've just looked over the bridge and noticed this towpath that runs secluded down where the river is, which is a perfect opportunity to make an escape away from CCTV, rather than going into a city centre which will be covered in CCTV. So we're going to go to that pub round the corner and see if it's, because that'll establish if they've gone by.
It's quite clear that, isn't it? Apparently they've got cameras that some of them do cover the canal. So if we were going to get people running by, you'd be able to see them running.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
Next, detectives target a nearby factory, which has more CCTV covering the canal path.
Right, I've seen there's a camera outside of that building.
Yep.
Have you got that camera? Is that the path?
That's the path.
Do you know where that comes out of?
I believe that comes out like college.
We're just now in the process of downloading approximately 5 hours worth of footage to cover that time period between 8 and 2 o'clock in the morning, because they could have come that way and they could have made the escape that way. It's right next to the canal, so if they were going to discard anything, such as a weapon, it's a perfect opportunity to discard evidence. And hopefully, when we view it, it will assist us further in which way these suspects have gone. We're getting 2100, yeah.
To midnight.
As evening approaches, the investigation takes a significant leap forward with an unexpected tip-off from a member of the public.
We've had a numerous piece of intelligence today. The main one being we've had 2 brothers named by a person. The first one is an Aman Ansar and his brother, which is Sahil Ansar. Now they both live at Springdale Avenue, which is above the address, about 100 yards maximum on the other side of the road. And where the bike's been left, there's an alley with a little track that cuts through to that house. They are known to us for possess drugs, possess offensive weapon, bladed article, aggravated burglary, and they match the physical description given. So at 15:28 hours today, I designated them as suspects for the murder.
Senior Investigating Officer Damien Roebuck starts planning his arrest strategy for when the 2 brothers are apprehended.
As we are dealing with an offence of a knife crime, we have to get the actual suspects assessed by our critical incident managers. Now, they're trained to make sure the right resources go and make those arrest inquiries, whether that be a firearms officer, an officer with suitable PPE, or an officer who has a taser. And then from there, we can move that forward, and bear in mind where they're arrested from, that will then become a further scene, which will be locked down, and will need forensics and a search team going through it.
Two brothers have been declared suspects in the murder of 33-year-old Kaufan Seif in Huddersfield. The father of three was stabbed to death in his own home with his wife and children in the next room. A manhunt is underway to find his killers. While a motive for this vicious attack remains unclear, forensics are at the forefront of the investigation. They're fingerprinting as much of the inside of the house as possible.
What I'm going to do now, I've found the inside of the doors, photograph them as they are, and then I'm going to put some of these location arrows onto the map, so I'm going to actually photograph and recover. Just sticking these scaled labels, we write down a gravity arrow on it, just so when it actually goes to the fingerprint bureau that they can say which way up an actual fingerprint is. What I'm after is of how the suspect has got in here. So if they've opened the door up, where are the suspects likely to have handled or likely to have touched? What I'm going to do now is lift the same marks using an acetate sheet and some 3M tape, what we use. It's like special tape for lifting fingerprint marks. You see a little bit of detail around here. These marks are still very visible on the door, which has an indication, it's not guaranteed, but it has an indication that it's an old mark, so I'm presuming these aren't the suspect's marks. I've got quite a few fingerprints from the inside of the rear door, a couple off the lounge/kitchen door, and one from the kitchen door frame. It's very important to find all sorts of forensics in a case like this. Every bit of evidence goes a long way.
The fingerprints will be sent to the Identification Bureau. Overnight, the investigating team has been reviewing the CCTV evidence.
So initially we just had the footage that showed them running away from the scene. We didn't know where they'd gone. We obviously were aware that at some stage prior to the offence had been in the Hall Avenue area. So they've downloaded some really key footage at the side of Hall Avenue which shows them running then down out onto the main road. One of these suspects here has got a rucksack in his hand. Now, jumping back as they run down Bewley Road, that backpack's actually on his back, so he's taking it off his back at this point, which made us think, is he going to discard anything here? And this area is quite overgrown, so we think it's happened off camera, but they are sort of lifting the bag to the front as if they're going to take something out. And that's this area here where we've recovered those tablets and some trainers that seemed out of place, quite new. So we know after they run from Hall Avenue across St Thomas Road, and we've got footage here on a commercial premises that show them at 18 minutes past 11 just running very briefly, three figures there running around the back of this building. Then we capture them a very short time later going onto the canal path, which obviously is an ideal place to go. A lot of water down there. We haven't recovered the knife used in the offence yet, so that has become now a focus of our attention. So the priority today is to follow that footpath which comes out near Kirklees College. So we've got about 16, 17 officers out today doing trial of that area.
While the investigating team continues its CCTV trawl, the specialist search team deploys its marine unit to the canal.
I've come here with underwater search. We have had a recce, had a walk through the area. We've obviously got the river to us left, we've got the canal to us right, which is obviously going to be quite challenging, and we've got the land, we've got the bushes. So we've just come up with a strategy of how we're going to tackle this area to search it for the items that we're after. The dive unit have a number of options available to them. They obviously have the boats, they can wade, they can go under the water. It'll all depend on how deep the water is, how fast flowing it is, to what technique they use.
It's not long before the team finds an object of interest.
So this is the knife that's been recovered by the dive team. The actual knife is bent, which suggests to us it's been used for something that's caused the metal to bend on that. But that's quite specific with the speckle design and the name on the knife. But I'll feed that back into the investigation team. Sometimes we just find knives and we can't explain why. There may be another 5 or 10 in here, we'll see.
And then another discovery.
The reason I brought you is there's just a glove to your left-hand side there, and maybe I'd not pull that importance through without these two items here. Now just be careful, this wall's really slippery. So we've got the rucksack here, and I know we're close to a college, but we've got a rucksack, we've got a black item of clothing, it looks like it's got some writing on it. We've got these two, we've got another rucksack in the water, we've got the glove. The dive team will use their ladders to get it down, and if you want, they'll bag it, but we're going to have a stack of exhibits to pass over.
Seize it, and then at the end of when we finish,
I'll ring you.
Just hand it out to me, and then I'll book it in when we get that.
With the two brothers, Aman and Sahil Ansar, on the run, police have entered their home address to look for evidence to link them directly to the attack. The house is just a few doors down from the crime scene.
We'll liaise with the forensic manager in relation to a forensic strategy, and then we come and conduct a methodical search of the premises, looking for the items that the detectives told us are relevant. So on this occasion, we're looking for a knife that's been used in the offence, mobile phones, specific clothing that we've got on CCTV for the suspects, and any other items basically that may be of relevance to the investigation. Has Richard photographed it?
Yes, I have it. They had to be swabbed by CSI.
They find a number of items of clothing that could be linked to the crime.
Say that one now because it's got a big knife on
Yeah,
front.
it'd be really obvious, wouldn't it? And it's too small, wouldn't it? Retrieve it, and then when we've finished in here, we'll go out and see if we can identify them outside.
Yeah, I'll get it out.
The search also yields mobile phones, SIM cards, and passports, indicating the brothers are still in the country.
But it's ringing, isn't it?
Yeah. There's more black copper style jackets than what we've got.
We'll finish this address, pass the exhibits to the exhibits officers, and then we'll review where we're at in terms of the other scenes that we've got outstanding. But we're looking in a better position today, so we've seized in excess of 20 exhibits, which have been subject to CSI examination. So these two.
Right. Sound. No, we're just getting some tops and having no big buffers.
Back at HMET, SIO Damien Roebuck is getting an update from Area Forensics Manager Kate Whitehead on the items that were sent off for fast-track DNA testing.
Yeah. So, Damien, I'm still waiting on the results to come back for the rework of the DNA. I've been told not to hold out hope. When I've spoken to the scientists, they sampled one of the purple latex gloves. The profile from the gloves is not going to be suitable for loading to the database.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that it will generate as a name.
Okay.
The umbrella, part of the top of the handle, and a button on the umbrella. So they're the areas that they sampled on the umbrella. The profile from the umbrella is poorer than what we're getting off the gloves.
With no forensic breakthrough, they come up with a new plan.
The bicycle, at the moment, this is probably maybe my strongest sort of feeling about what we should go with next, but I'd perhaps like just to make some further inquiries first. So the first thing I'd be interested to know is, on the CCTV, does it look like it's always Grey Joggers man that is on the bicycle, or do they pass it between themselves?
Okay.
Have we recovered any CCTV from Springdale Avenue yet? And is the bike seen to come or go from that premises? As in, trying to establish whether the bike belongs to them and that household, or whether it's perhaps been stolen from somewhere else, or they've picked it up from somewhere.
What I can say is we're on our way out to actually cover that CCTV. Plan B, and they're going to take it straight down to imaging and see if we can start viewing straight away.
Okay, that would be excellent. I think you would probably end up with a mixed profile, as we discussed before, and again that might only be suitable for direct comparison, but unlike the gloves, you have definitely got that offender coming to the scene on the bike.
Yeah, I agree.
At the canal, a specialist police team is now searching an area highlighted by the CCTV evidence found after the attack. One of the suspects is seen to throw the latex gloves he is wearing into the water.
We've looked at the CCTV from this premises, and you can see it. The suspect discards it into the canal.
They land about 4 foot inside on the water, but they float. And then they float, they come to the side, and they start coming down. There's a drain, and if they've gone down that, it might have flowed into the river at the other side, which is where the dive team are starting tomorrow. So all I'm going to do is just have a look here, see if I can work out where they're likely to have gone.
The race is on to find the glove before any key forensic material, such as blood or DNA, is eroded by the water.
The task is quite a massive task. Depends on what we can get back from that glove, with it being in water and the elements with the cold weather.
It's day 4 of the investigation into the murder of father of 3, Kalfan Seif, in Huddersfield. Overnight, snow has fallen, making the forensic team's job even harder.
I know for a fact here they don't throw anything over, so I can see that. But round that little corner there...
While the dive team continues to search the canal bed for a potential murder weapon, other members of the specialist search team are combing an area of waste ground.
In the waste ground behind us, we've just got this 4 separate latex gloves. There is another one, same type of latex gloves that was found in the water, covered by the dive team, and a small black bag, which is quite similar to the ones we've got intelligence about.
I'm going to take them back, and then we'll get booked in by exhibits officer, and then they'll just decide what's going to happen with it on the forensic strategy.
One there.
A number of similar latex gloves have been found. Forensics are now examining one from the alley behind the victim's house.
The gloves are down a shallow grate within the alleyway. They appear to be inside out, as if they've been taken off and deposited there.
They'll get each of them out, spread them out evenly, do a search on the one side, then look at the reverse side. So it's important to make sure we look at both inner and outer surfaces before we progress.
Forensic Enhancement Officer Gary Banks is looking for partial prints, known as ridge detail.
Fingerprints can fluoresce depending on types of sweat, and the high intensity light sources stimulate those sweat particles. The reason why we cut them open is it enables me to examine them in a lot better detail, and I can have a closer look at each of the tips of the fingers. And also it's important to look at the lower edges, because people tend to use their fingers also to be able to pull the gloves on. I've examined, and there's no ridge detail I can see. The next process is vacuum metalled deposition, and it uses gold and zinc. I will heat up the gold, which will vaporize into the vacuum and coat itself onto the gloves, and then go onto the zinc metal, and that will put a second coating on. Hopefully, if there's any ridge detail there, we'll be able to see. There's actually a couple of minute ridges, but it's not going to warrant us sending it through to the Bureau for an expert to look at. So we'll continue on with the next process.
Back at headquarters, there's been another tip-off about a third suspect.
As a result of community intelligence, a further name has come into the inquiry. It's linked to the two Ansar brothers who I designated as suspects on Monday. I'm currently looking into that individual to establish where he fits into the investigation and whether I'm actually going to upgrade that person to a suspect. The community intelligence that we've received over the last couple of days is that this wasn't a random attack. The suspects more likely have targeted the address, but we're not sure of the motive and whether that was a burglary gone wrong or whether it was targeting the individuals inside.
A specialist search team is now at the victim's house, looking for clues to specifically link the victim to the suspects, who are still on the run.
We've gone, mate. What's up?
End of body worn footage.
There's several items that would be of interest to the investigation team. Obviously, mobile phones that yield crucial information. And then, due to the nature of the assault, any beladed articles, outstanding weapons that could have been used during that assault.
I've done all this bit.
Any items really that could show us a lifestyle or indeed point in the direction of some kind of motive as to why the attack's taken place. We've got 4 items that have been recovered from the kitchen area, a couple of mobile phones that may be of interest, a SIM card in a phone box, but that is pretty much it really. A bit disappointed, not as much as we thought we'd find.
The investigating team is getting an update about the possible whereabouts of the two brothers.
The suspects may have fled to an address in Rastrick, which is a neighbouring village to Kirklees. Now, that intelligence came through this morning. We've done some work with telecoms inquiries. The inquiries we've received have resulted in evidence and potential data that the offenders and the suspects were at that address at approximately 23:30 hours last night. We're now looking at getting a further search warrant to arrest the suspects. So it's a fast-moving investigation, but hopefully we can get them into custody as soon as possible.
Please, get your hands up, we can see them! No! Stay where you are, Keep your hands up, we can see them!
Right, so right, push past him. Keep your hands up, I can see him. Watch that door.
Please, anyone else in it? I've got cuffs.
All right, cuffs on.
Please, stay where you are now! Do not move! Stay where you are!
Just a few hours later, the brothers are arrested by firearms officers at the flat in Rastrick, which is the home of one of their friends.
Get down on the floor! Get down on the floor! Subjects, on your front now.
Right, we'll keep.
What's your name?
Sohail.
Yeah, Sohail.
Right,
what's your last name?
Ansar.
Sohail Ansar.
Okay, you're under arrest, mate. On suspicion of murder, okay. Do you understand? Right, clear.
Subject secure.
What's your name? You what? A man what? A man Ansar.
You're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't say anything but it may harm your defence if you're not meant to question something which later line in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Do you understand?
Subjects are under arrest.
The third suspect is also tracked down and located at student accommodation in Sheffield.
5 minutes ago I was informed that we've just made the third arrest for the outstanding suspect in the murder of Kalfan Saif. Wahab Saif has been arrested in Sheffield. We'll be transporting him back up to West Yorkshire to continue with the investigation and interviews in the morning.
3 suspects are now in custody for the murder of 33-year-old Kalfan Saif in Huddersfield.
Kalfan Saif has been murdered. CCTV inquiries led the police to suspect you are one of those males that attended his address. So are you responsible for the murder of Mr. Saif?
No comment.
While they are continuing to be questioned by detectives, their mobile phones have been seized and taken to the digital forensics unit.
Patrick, we've got this phone that's come from suspect who's in custody at the moment. It's a matter of urgency. If we can get a full download done on it, as much as data as possible, and we'll get it back to OIC for review.
This is Apple iPhone. It came to us powered on without the PIN code, and we will try to extract data that could be later on used as evidence. Okay, data extraction of the mobile phone gives us the access to the images, videos, messages, all of the third-party apps that are inside of the phone, and all of the location data that are stored in this device.
Out of the 24 phones seized as part of this investigation, the team manages to get data from 18 of them. This is passed on to the investigating team.
There are at least one device which we've got, which we believe that one of our defendants was using at the time or just after the offence. That device has material on there which links into what a witness has told us about Wahhab's safe, in that Wahhab approached him, asked him if he could stay within his student property to keep his head down. And then when Wahhab came to see our witness, the witness asked what was happening, what was going on, why this strange behaviour, to which Wahhab has shown him a mobile phone. And our witnesses have been able to recount that the phone had a picture of a Huddersfield-based newspaper, and that the headline of that article it was looking at mentioned the word murder. Within that device, which was seized from Wahhab, we've been able to look at the websites that have been activated, and within that are several hits of which it catalogues how the investigation moved on.
After hours of CCTV viewing, there's a major leap forward. The investigating team finds footage of the suspects taking off their face coverings after the attack. They're also seen throwing the gloves that were found on the waste ground earlier in the day. The two are now definitively linked. It's a key find ahead of the custody interviews with the Ansar brothers.
We interview a man, Ansar, with a solicitor at Huddersfield Police Station. Throughout the interview, he pretty much gave a no comment to all questions asked. Can you tell me any information whatsoever about how he came to die?
No comment.
Have you had any involvement in it?
No comment.
The purpose of the interview was to basically get an account from him, find out where he was at the time, who he was associating with, and also to ask him how he knows everybody involved. This took place on Saturday the 14th. Can you tell me where you were on Saturday the 14th, at any stage?
No problem.
Were you with your brother, Sahil?
No problem.
Khalfan, Saif, were you friends with him?
No problem.
Were you enemies with him?
No problem.
We also wanted to know what links he had to the addresses and the items that have been found, such as the bike, the rubber gloves and the umbrella. He was asked if he would be forensically linked to the victim himself or the victim's home address. Will we find your DNA on his body?
No comment.
Is there any reason whatsoever why your DNA would be inside that house?
No comment.
Following on from that, we move into the CCTV. He was shown the compilation, and throughout that process he looked extremely nervous, particularly at the point where the suspects go behind the warehouse and they start to demask. Have you noticed that these individuals seem to think they're safe at this point and that they're all pulling hoods up, taking masks down? Is that you?
Comment.
Did you not realise there was a CCTV camera there?
No comment.
He was physically shaking and he was having to hold his own arm to stop himself from shaking.
As the broader evidential picture begins to build, at the fingerprint lab, the seized latex glove undergoes a process called gentian violet.
Gentian violet is a wet process where we coat the actual surface of the gloves and it attaches to any fatty acids which are secreted from fingerprints. Well, it's interesting. The GV appears to have brought some rich detail in the palm area and one of the fingers. So my next course of action is to get the mark photographed as soon as possible and get it through to the Fingerprint Bureau.
The suspect's friend's flat in Rastrick, where they were arrested, is being forensically searched.
Yeah, can you just look under there for me? Lift it. Oh, there's that glove there. Yeah, we've got a knife under here as well. Under the sofa in the front room, when we've lifted it up, there's a machete, which is about 50 to 60 centimetres long. That's been in a sheath. And then there's also a black builder's glove under there. When the CSI has taken the photos and the flash has lit up the blade, you can see that has been wiped with something. So there's some sort of liquid residue the length of the blade in 2 or 3 places, as if it's been wiped off or an attempt's been made to clean it. I think it's been wiped.
Yes, it has been wiped. You see the smears, yeah. Three men are being held on suspicion of the murder of Kalfan Seif in Huddersfield. At the address where the Ansar brothers were detained, there have been a number of important finds.
A warrant was executed here overnight with the premises and started a search in this room, and almost immediately located a black rucksack. Contained within that rucksack several items. There's been most notably black zombie knife. It's in a sheath. There's a pair of black tracksuit bottoms, and then there's a balaclava in there as well. On the search of the sofa, found a black puffer jacket. There's a bank card in the breast pocket in the name of one of the suspects, and a quantity of cash as well. The coat on the floor, we've compared it to the images on the CCTV that we have of the suspects hiding around the back of the beer shop. There's some white tags on the inside of the hood, which we think looks similar to the image on CCTV. There's like a cigarette burn or similar just on the back of the hood, and you can see the white filling through that burn. Yeah, potentially, yeah. Now, looking at the images on CCTV that we've got, there is a similar white mark on the back of this puffer jacket that the lad's wearing. It's a lad with light grey tracksuit bottoms. That little white spot there, I think that corresponds with where it's got a cigarette burn on the back of this jacket. Were these all in that same bag together?
Yeah. The cigarette burn there.
They're clean, aren't they? Yeah, we'll photograph the other side.
More forensic evidence is in the bathroom.
When we've searched the bathroom, there is some blood spattering near to the toilet area here, and on the side of the bath panelling here, there's some blood staining as well. So SOC have been made aware of that. Yeah. We found a yellow towel. You can see there what appears to be blood staining on that, so we'll be seizing that. Also in the bathroom area, we found a balaclava, which potentially might have been used in the offence. And also a Nike jacket that potentially could be linked to the suspects as well. So that'll be getting seized as well.
A crime scene investigator is called to assess the blood.
We can see some contact staining on the radiator and some contact staining on the bottom of the bath panel there. There's also some red staining along the wall here and this part here and at the bottom of the toilet, but it doesn't continue down onto the floor. So I'm just swabbing one bit of apparent blood from each area. That'll be sent off to the labs so that we can potentially identify who that blood has come from. If it came back to the victim that's never been here before, that might then, create a line of questioning for officers.
Back at HMET, the DNA sampling taken from the handlebars of the bicycle left at the crime scene has thrown up a match.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you. Bye-bye. Right, that's Kate Whitehead. So the mini tapes from the bicycle, both right and left, we've got a major contributor from Sahil Ansar. Excellent. So we've got him there, we've got him on that bike. We just need to obviously make sure we've got the actual documents linking that bike to the scene. Brilliant. Excellent, yeah. For interview, she's going to send it through from forensics and we can get that to the interview teams. Good job, thank you.
It's a significant result, but while the custody clock is ticking, the investigation can't afford to slow down.
any of the clothing that these three individuals have got on, will any of it match clothing we've seized from you upon your arrest?
No comment.
Or have you disposed of that clothing?
No comment.
Detectives are now beginning to piece together how the suspects got from the waste ground by the canal to the flat where they were arrested in Rastrick.
About 23:27, so that's 17 minutes after the incident of the attack, a silver-type vehicle arrives on Colne Road outside this premises, where three people get into that vehicle, which we believe is a taxi. That vehicle goes along Colne Road back towards the main road and it drives off, so we lose sight of that. About an hour and 15 minutes after the original incident where the male was killed, we've got a male arriving. It's about roughly 10 houses away from where the actual main incident happened.
This is the brothers' home address.
Go into this premises, and what we now know is that the male then comes out and he changes his clothes and is carrying an overnight bag. They get back in that vehicle and they leave that area.
After just 6 days of investigation, all three suspects are charged.
CPS have authorised charges of murder and also robbery for all three suspects. It's a job well done so far to actually secure charges, to remand the three individuals and take them off the streets. The hard work starts now, preparing for court and ensuring that we're trial ready and match fit for when that comes.
One of the most important areas to prepare for court is the forensics. But so far, there are still considerable challenges.
We actually get a knife recovered under a hedge and just behind a wall. Now, initially, we discounted that because it looked an older knife and we couldn't tell how long it had been there. However, when we view the CCTV, it's so close to where we see the suspect run past, and the image does look as if it's been pushed into the mud rather than been there, laying there for quite a while. I've gone back to our area forensic manager, Kate Whitehead, and we've agreed that that needs sending off as well.
So forensically what we've got so far, we've done the umbrella low level is never going to be of any use at all. The gloves low level but suitable for comparison but negative against a man and Sahil, so we will get them checked against Wahab once his DNA goes through, and the bike, the major profile on the handlebars left and right to Sahil.
Fingerprints on gloves?
Yes, the fingerprints on the gloves came back negative, which again, they have been double gloved, would explain. I mean, they said there was a tiny bit of palm, but it wasn't sufficient enough.
With 300 exhibits already secured, the team checks what else might merit forensic testing.
So if we put that down, then Justin, as a make further inquiries for that one.
Are we not doing anything with the body?
Keep it as an exhibit just in case.
A number of items are sent off to be tested for traces of blood and DNA. These include 2 zombie knives and the knife found under the hedge.
Someone's been stabbed, so they potentially think this might be the murder weapon. I'm going to be using a low-power microscope to have a look at every aspect of the knife to see if there's any blood or skin or fatty material on it, potentially get cellular material on the handle to try and link it to a suspect, or potentially blood from the victim to link it to be the murder weapon.
Dozens of items have been seized during the murder investigation of 33-year-old Kaufan Seif.
Retrieve it, and then when we've finished in here, we'll go out and see if we can identify him outside.
These include 2 zombie knives that are believed to belong to the defendants.
So today I'm examining a zombie knife that was found in the suspect's house in the living room. So I'll just be examining it for any touch DNA, blood, skin that potentially from the suspect or victim to link it to the case. It's relatively clean, so there's not much to test. There's still like fibres or potentially like food material on it. I'll be using a HAM solution, which goes a pink colour when it detects blood. So if I find anything, I'll choose a filter paper, takes any potential blood off with that, put my 2 solutions on, and then if it goes pink, it's blood. If it doesn't, then it's something else.
The zombie knife could provide key evidence of the victim's blood.
We always have to look at every different angle, so we always rotate it as much as we can. If any of that indent in the recesses, it could be quite hidden. If it is blood, we'll then sample it and send it off to DNA. We also examine the handle, especially for a knife, a handle, because that's obviously where someone will touch it, so they'll get touch DNA over that. So this knife, I didn't find any blood or skin. I sent off the cutting edge samples to DNA just to make sure if there was anybody that's cut that we'll find it. But for now, I can put this item away and just start the next item.
With no success in the DNA and blood testing, all hopes for the knives rest on the fingerprint lab.
So normally on television series, if a fingerprint's ever shown, it's always a perfect mark. It's obvious whether it's a finger or a piece of palm. And unfortunately, these aren't the sort of marks we get. We tend to get partial marks, which have been left by accident, so that they're only smudges or smears.
Identification expert Stuart Horton is examining the partial print.
I have a suspect for this case, so the first thing I would do is get the fingerprint form for the suspect. Find my orientation, and then try and match the ridge endings and characteristics. And it's just a question of moving them round until you're happy with a certain point, a certain area of the fingerprint. And when you see the flow of the ridges on the fingerprint form match with the flow of the ridges on the photograph, then we can start looking at the finer details. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over to the machine over there, just so I can look at the mark more magnified, and I can mark up the characteristics I believe to be on the photograph that are the same or are consistent with the ones on the fingerprint form. This just gives me a second check. Now we fold the fingerprint form and place it onto the machine. It's just a light box with a light source that comes up from below. This then allows me to shine a light onto the images. I'm marking up the things that I think are consistent between the 2 images. So I can see there's an area where a line ends, count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So those 2 are consistent with each other. I then move to the next one, count down 2 from there. There's another characteristic which matches. When I'm happy I have enough of these points that are consistent, that's when I would say that that was an identification.
Once Stuart's findings are independently verified, the results can be confirmed.
After fully doing my comparison and having it verified by a colleague, I can state that in my expert opinion that the mark on the knife has been made by the suspect's finger.
The fingerprint on the knife has been expertly identified as Aman Ansar's. The latex gloves recovered from the waste ground have also revealed a hit, this time through DNA.
A large amount of gloves were recovered by the Pulsar team, and therefore we've had to try and narrow down which gloves we then submitted for DNA. And we did that using the CCTV trawl of the area to follow the offender's route. And on the CCTV, it appears as though at this point they discard the gloves that they're wearing. So we've selected those gloves to be submitted for DNA analysis specifically. When the lab have processed those gloves, 1 pair of them has been identified as having a DNA match to Sahil Ansar. So that helps confirm to us that the people that we're tracking on the CCTV from the address of the incident and away from the scene helps corroborate that one of those males is Sahil Ansar.
That's in addition to the DNA found on the handlebars of the bicycle left at the crime scene, which also matches to Sahil Ansar.
So the main evidence in this case hinges around the CCTV and the forensic evidence. They are part and parcel and work hand in glove. The CCTV puts them at the scene, but the actual forensic evidence actually links them categorically that they were there or in that vicinity at that time.
All of the evidence obtained is compiled into a special evidence pack for court. Chris Evans is responsible for producing a 3D model of the victim's injuries.
When the job goes to court, there will be images shown to the jury of the deceased and what's happened to them. When we're looking at the photographs of injuries, if it's, for example, from a cut or a bruise from this point to this point, the relative positions of that injury and other features of the body need to match up. So if someone has a particularly wide mouth, for example, if there's a cut on their cheek, ideally it needs to be the same relative distance from one side of the cut to the mouth, and so we try and make it roughly the same. Showing the actual post-mortem photographs would be quite distressing. So we put together a 3D model of roughly what the victim looked like, trying to make it realistic in terms of their rough shape and size. And then we take the photographs that were taken during the post-mortem, we kind of sample that and add it onto a 3D model of the person. In this case, the deceased has one major injury to his stomach, and then there are other more minor injuries, including some marks to the side of his face and around his side. So the pathologist can go through their report to the jury and everyone at court and use what we've done as a visual guide to help explain their findings.
With the evidence presented to the three defendants, they all admit to being at the address on the night of the murder. But why they were there remains unclear.
The defendants are supposed to provide a defence case statement to us as police officers, and it basically generally outlines their defence at court. In this case, Sahil Ansar puts himself at the address and inside the address from his defence case statement, but I think he claims that it was either self-defence or accidental was the injury that was caused to our deceased, Kalfan Saif. The other two defendants both admit being present outside the address, but deny going in or actually with any intent to commit murder. Our case is that they were all three involved in this as a joint enterprise.
Confident of the key evidence against the three defendants, Senior Investigating Officer Damien Roebuck heads to court for the start of the trial.
All three defendants, so Sahil Ansar, Aman Ansar and Wahab Saif, have all been charged with the murder of Kalfan Saif back in January. They've also all been charged with robbery against Kalfan Saif's surviving wife, Louise. The trial is expected to take between 2 and 3 weeks, where we'll go through the evidence both from a prosecution case and a defence case. From the word go, we were looking for 3 individuals from early CCTV that we recovered. We've done a long, extensive CCTV trawl. We've been working with our partners in the forensic unit and our area forensic manager, and we've currently got what I think is a strong case. I think that initial investigation and that time and effort that was put in over that first 7 days with long extended shifts by the entire investigation team has resulted in all 3 defendants having no choice but to at least put themselves at or outside the scene. coming to the end of the third week of the trial. Yesterday afternoon we received 2 guilty verdicts in relation to murder for Aman Ansar and Sahil Ansar. We've come back this morning and the jury have returned a guilty verdict of manslaughter against Wahab Saif.
Victims often don't get a voice during the trial. At the point of sentencing, the victim personal statement allows them just to explain to the jury, to the suspects themselves and to the judge how this crime has affected them and their immediate family and friends. So this was written by Kalfan's wife. On the 14th of January 2023, my husband Kalfan was murdered in our family home and I was the victim of robbery. My son, then 7, was also witness to the robbery. From this day, my world was turned upside down. Not only did I lose my husband, Kalfan, but I also lost my soulmate, and my 3 children lost their father. We had to immediately leave our family home, and today I'm still currently living in temporary accommodation. I'm trying to raise our 3 children alone. I'm physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. My baby is almost 1. Cries constantly for his father. My son is now 4. He doesn't understand what's happened or why we've had to move. My son, now 8, he has now so much anger in him. He can't talk about what he witnessed or how he feels about losing his father. I fear that my son has now mental health issues due to what has happened. Finally, I've had to attend court and give evidence, and seeing my husband come out into the street where he's dying in front of me. I will never forget the day Kalfan was murdered, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. It's just so tragic, really, and the fact that those 3 children, for them to be in the house and they saw him dying in the street, it just shows how much of an impact it's had on all of them.
Okay, good. Yeah, we're ready for you.
Okay, Ron, you should pop your phone down, mate. We're just going to record this bit before we start talking.
Yeah, why?
It's what I do in true crime documentaries.
Okay.
I'll just do it.
Yeah, do it, yeah, sure. Look forward to seeing it. All this bit's going in the edit?
I think so.
Okay.
It's more real.
Is it? Okay. Let's go. January 1978. Sid Vicious leaves his girlfriend Nancy Spungen in England and jets off to Atlanta with his band. He's the bassist for the world's most controversial group, the Sex Pistols, the vanguard of a punk movement that, in the space of a year, has shocked the British establishment to its core. Now they have their sights set on America, but just 10 months later, the band have split up, Nancy has been stabbed in a New York hotel room, and Sid has been charged with her murder. Was Sid really responsible? And if he wasn't, who was? With the help of forensic psychologist Dr. Julia Shaw, I, Ramesh Ranganathan, a comedian with admittedly no experience of criminal investigations whatsoever, will try and solve the mystery once and for all. The Misinvestigations of Ramesh Ranganathan.
What do you know about Sid and Nancy?
I know very little about Sid and Nancy. You know, I know that Sid, he was like kind of one of the biggest faces in punk. And my perception of Sid and Nancy is two people that were just really into drugs and were kind of quite self-destructive.
What do you know about punk?
I'm not massively into the music, but the ethos of punk I am a fan of. And I think that whole kind of world is really interesting.
Because Britain in the mid-70s was at such a trigger point, unemployment through the roof, national strikes, collapsing public services, he had all these young people looking at it going, this is our future.
Look at me now, I'm nothing.
Their frustration and anger just kind of exploded into this whole new cultural identity of anarchic rebellion that horrified the establishment.
Punk rock has become almost a battle cry in British society. For many people, it's a bigger threat to our way of life than Russian communism or hyperinflation.
Sid Vicious is kind of one of the poster boys for that whole movement. And he and Nancy lived the punk lifestyle, you know, to its absolute fullest.
Nancy dying at just 20 was tragic, but it was completely overshadowed by Sid's notoriety and by the fact that she was a punk and an addict. I want to get to know Nancy.
The key questions that we're kind of looking into here are who was Nancy, what was she like, who was Sid and what was he like, and whether Sid was capable of doing something like this to Nancy, who he supposedly loved. If you talk to people who are sort of in and around that scene, they feel like not only is it unlikely that he did it,
but there was a whole cast of other characters who were in and out of the room that night who could have done it.
Where are you going to start?
Where are we going to start?
We're going to ask Julia what to do.
Oh, yeah.
To begin the investigation, I was supposed to meet criminal psychologist Julia Shaw at 0900 hours on London's Denmark Street. But I turned up at 9:03. Because that's punk, isn't it?
Hello, Dr. Julia Shaw.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Welcome to Denmark Street.
Thank you.
This was the hub of the music industry in the 70s. And I mean, it's sort of stuck in time. Got the same vibe, some of the same shops. And this street is famous because David Bowie was living in a converted ambulance trying to meet people in the music industry here. And the Rolling Stones recorded their first album. So it's really sort of a hot spot for music at the time.
Very nice.
And this is number 6, which was hired by Malcolm McLaren, who was the Sex Pistols manager. So they recorded here and they were living here for a while.
Do you know that the pioneer of the diving helmet worked and lived here?
Are you just making shit up?
No, it just says it on that sign.
Oh.
OK, well, shall we go inside?
Yeah.
Have a look?
Yep.
It's a perfect place to come if you're into punk and diving helmets.
The manager of the Sex Pistols, Malcolm McLaren, was in a relationship with designer Vivienne Westwood, and they were arguably the architects of the British punk movement. Their fashion boutique on the King's Road was a hangout for disenfranchised teenagers, including Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten. McLaren wanted to create the quintessential British punk band, so, inspired by Westwood's visual aesthetic, he formed the Sex Pistols. They shocked the nation, fighting at gigs and swearing on television. Concerts were cancelled, records were banned, and the Sex Pistols became infamous.
So this is where they rehearsed and lived. And all of these drawings are actually done by the band, Johnny Rotten.
Oh my God. Rotten bastard.
So that must have been Sid.
His head is a cock and balls, it looks like. I mean, I don't know. That's what it looks like to
It does. I mean, there's hair and everything.
Yeah.
The cheeks.
It's always the hair that sort of gives it away, isn't it?
Yeah. What age do you expect the person to be who made these drawings?
Well, they were sort of very young, weren't they? I understand trying to be funny and putting up weird stuff, but why the swastika?
I guess the point of punk is to shock, and so it's very much in line with the visual language and the attitude. Just do the most offensive thing you can. And that was quite a big part of Sid Vicious's aesthetic, right?
Swastikas?
Yeah.
Well, they want a fucking angel in flares and an anorak. That ain't me, baby. We aren't nice boys. We were fucking nasty little bastards.
So there we have Nanny Spunger. which is pretty offensive.
She's been depicted as a sort of a wasted sponger.
Hypersexualized, the big boobs, is actually kind of similar to how the press was talking about her, how a lot of the people in their circle were talking about her as a sort of a former sex worker, as a junkie. She was also known as nauseating Nancy. All of these things that made her this almost, I don't know, this person you could toss away and sort of forget about because Nancy was seen in this way. A lot of people feel like this case was never really fully investigated.
February 1958. In a Philadelphia suburb, Nancy Spungen was born into a middle-class Jewish family. She struggled with her mental health from a young age. Her mother, Deborah, describes violent outbursts, and she was expelled from multiple schools. This yearbook photo belies the mental health issues teenage Nancy suffered. At 15, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and attempted to take her own life. At 17, after being kicked out of university for drug possession and theft, Nancy moved to New York and discovered the punk scene, which led her to England, the Sex Pistols and Sid Vicious. 2 years later, at just 20, she was discovered dead in a hotel bathroom, with one stab wound to the abdomen.
So what do we know?
So we know it's October 1978. The Sex Pistols have just broken up, and Sid and Nancy are living at a hotel in New York called the Chelsea Hotel. And the evening that Nancy dies, Sid takes a bunch of drugs. They're called Tuinol, which are a drug that he was using a lot at the time. And so he's out of it for quite a lot of the night. Then in the morning, he calls the police saying something's happened to Nancy. And the police then establish that she was stabbed between 6 and 7 in the morning and then died shortly thereafter. And so the question is, what happened that night?
And what is Sid's account of all this?
So Sid confesses at points and then he denies it at points. He is then released on bail, and shortly thereafter he dies of a heroin overdose before the thing can go to court.
I guess the question is, was Sid really vicious? Who can we talk to about that?
Well, we can talk to someone who lived here with him at the time, who was the roadie for the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
His name is Rodent.
Okay. And that's his real name?
No.
Oh.
His name is Steve.
Okay. But he looks a bit mousy.
I guess we'll find out.
Julie around with my brilliant idea and arranged for us to meet Steve Connolly, aka Rodent, the Sex Pistols roadie from 1975 till the band split up in 78. I've discovered everyone in punk has to have an AKA, so I've decided mine is Rom Aggrieved. It's not great.
Rodent, Mr. Rodent?
Just Rodent.
Just Rodent.
And why's that?
When I was pissed, I looked like a rat and I was a roadie.
Huh.
Well, look, I know it's hard to imagine, but I'm a punk novice. So can you break down what punk is for me?
No.
Cool. That's punk.
Punk was very much a negative expression. It was a rejection of the 1 million unemployed and traditional politics. We'd had the 3-day week, we'd lived through the 3-day week. England was very grey. It did feel sort of like there wasn't really much to do. So, you know, if society rejects you, you reject society.
So is it kind of an explosion of feeling, and the whole ethos is like, we're just pissed off with everything, and then on top of that, you know, like, we're not going to wait to learn and become super musical. We're just going to get up and just give it a go.
No, absolutely. It wasn't about the music, it was about attitude. And attitude was the whole thing of it, you know, and I'm fueled by copious amounts of speed as well.
So what was Sid actually like?
Sid was charming, he was funny, he was gentle, and he was everything that everybody thinks Sid wasn't.
Rodent told us Sid's real name was John Ritchie. He grew up with single mum Anne, who struggled with heroin addiction throughout his childhood. In this photo from his school days in Tunbridge Wells, Sid looks like the quiet and mild-mannered boy his classmates described. As a teenager, he met John Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten, at a school for students with behavioural difficulties. Sid wasn't in the original Sex Pistols lineup, But he was at every gig, apparently inventing the pogo dance and causing the fights that made the band infamous. McLaren famously said, if Johnny Rotten is the voice of punk, then Vicious is the attitude. And in 1977, just 19 years old, he joined the band.
So the Sid that you read about, and is sort of, you know, this kind of guy that's getting into fights, because he kind of seemed like quite an unpleasant kind of rowdy guy.
He was called Vicious because he was anything but.
Right.
It was one of those nicknames as the opposite. But it did mean that when press started coming out there, people were there going, so you're vicious, are you? Go on, show us. Come on, then, if you think you're hard enough. So, you know, he started to retaliate.
And the name Vicious, do you think that became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or...?
Well, it became self-fulfilling, yes. I think, you know, he was forced into that position to some extent. And also because young people felt undervalued and worthless, you know. If you feel undervalued and worthless, you don't care if you're going to get shit kicked out of you in a fight, because, you know, that's what you deserve.
The young kids of today, they're frustrated and bored, they're sick of being pushed around.
As punk became a way for disillusioned teenagers to express themselves, Sid Vicious became their poster boy. 2 weeks after he joined the Sex Pistols, they were signed by A&M Records. In celebration, the band trashed their offices. A week later, Sid glassed someone in a nightclub, and their contract was terminated. The same week, 18-year-old Nancy followed her favourite New York punk band to London. She met the Sex Pistols, and Nancy and Sid quickly became inseparable. 3 months later, the band's iconic and only album reached #1 in the charts. The Sex Pistols were at the high point of their career. But the band were increasingly unhappy with Nancy's presence.
Whatever my feelings about Nancy are, we'll have to say that Sid and Nancy were besotted with each other. You know, they were completely committed to each other, so there's something nice there. However, I also think that Nancy was a vampire. It felt that she was part of Sid's demise in the heroin addiction. This nice, innocent, sweet, charming, witty young man became a sort of really rather boring man, and stroppy and selfish and everything that he wasn't before he became. And, you know, we did try to kidnap her one time.
What?
Well, it was a pretty pathetic attempt at kidnapping. Sid was sent to the dentist because he had bad teeth. We bought a one-way ticket for Nancy, and we're there saying, look, Nancy, it's the best for everybody. You just get on the plane. Here's your ticket. There was more and more of us all trying to hustle her into a cab to take her to the airport. She'd go running off into the Holiday Inn Marble Arch going, you can't do this. This is kidnapping. You can't do this. And we'd, like, drag her back and say, look, it's for the best. Sid, you know, it's not good for Sid. But, you know, it was a pretty pathetic and failed attempt. And, of course, Malcolm didn't approve because it was tearing up all of his nicely laid plans.
Around that time, Nancy gave a candid interview about Malcolm.
He didn't like me because I was a junkie. He tried to keep me and Sid apart for months and months and months. Sid just kept saying, look, and I'll have to stay in my place who I want to stay in my place, and you're not going to tell me who not to. So just back off. And he just...
So Nancy knew she was disliked, which can't have been easy for her.
One of the things that we noticed is that how negatively Nancy was sort of talked about in the press, you know, this sort of nauseating Nancy and all of this, and the depiction of her.
Sid defined punk. So many people, many young people, identified with Sid in a very big way. And so it's easy then to blame Nancy for ruining their idol.
Roden, his take on it is Nancy has led Sid astray, and it was their kind of misadventure that led to her death and then eventually his.
Obviously, we're talking about somebody that was, you know, had issues with mental health and issues with addiction. And if that was somebody we're dealing with now, you'd look at that person with sympathy and try and see how you can help that person. But unfortunately, because of the time we're talking about and because of the nature of a band and the dynamic of that, they just saw her as the villain of the whole piece. It's just quite sad.
Probably the date.
We needed to meet some people who could give us a deeper insight into Nancy. She must have had some friends in the US.
OK, I think we need to go to New York.
Yeah?
We should probably fly there, which I should probably need the laptop to book the flights. What do you Google? New York plane.
Nailing it.
look out that way. Carry on. Look over your shoulder, Rom, at the Brooklyn Bridge and back.
Manhattan's so expensive that we could only afford to be here for 48 hours to solve this case.
How long are we going to be doing this for?
So we had to be super efficient.
Like what?
Nancy moved to New York at 17 years old, 2 years before meeting Sid. In the 70s, Manhattan was a rough place to live. In parallel to the UK, young people were experiencing a social upheaval. The economy had collapsed and crime was through the roof. Drugs were easy to come by. Cheap rent attracted artists creating raw, edgy punk music in packed-out underground clubs. Nancy tried to carve out a career as a punk journalist, supporting herself with table dancing and occasional sex work. But we wanted to know more about teenage Nancy, so Julia tracked down her friend Deborah Evans, aka Debbie Revenge.
Hi, how are you guys?
Hello.
Come in.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Deborah.
I'm Ramesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome. This is me.
Oh, wow.
Very androgyny. I like it.
Punk rock saved my life. It saved a lot of our lives because we had nowhere else to go. And a lot of us didn't have families, and it became our chosen family.
When did you first meet Nancy?
Nancy, I met probably in some club go-go dancing. She was a really good go-go girl. I don't know if she was bipolar, but it seemed like it. When you can catch Nancy in a good mood, she was so sweet. She was very cunning and very smart. You have to be cunning to live a drug life because you're lying all the time. We all supported one another. I mean, it was really like our own dysfunctional family.
So the groupie family.
Well, the band and groupie family.
So am I right in saying that whereas now the term groupie is seen as something negative, back then it was something you aspired to be almost?
Oh, definitely. They actually had a magazine that came out back then. It would show like groupies with Led Zeppelin, and it would tell where they hang out on Sunset Strip and everything.
Wow, so this magazine actually encouraged teenage girls to become groupies. I mean, she looks about 13, doesn't she? It's shocking. I mean, today, that would be completely outrageous. But you get it, don't you? Because punk music was so exciting. And then if you become a groupie, that's your way of basically becoming part of the scene, right?
Right. And when you're with the band, you're like part of the band almost. Nancy, her whole adult life, she's wanted to have a rock and roll boyfriend, which I can understand. And she found one in Sid that she could actually manage. She was a gatekeeper without compare. Nancy was involved in every single inch of his life. She was so proud.
Did you have any concerns about Sid and Nancy's relationship, like watching it from where you were?
No, because it was just like every other drug addict relationship. In that sense, they'd have terrible drag-out fights, and then they'd make up and be fine for 5 or 6 days.
So it wasn't concerning because it's kind of what everyone...
Everybody was like that. Yeah, we didn't even think about it. And back then, you know, domestic violence, you didn't even think of it as domestic. We didn't even know what that was. We just liked to get in fights and stuff.
Do you think they loved each other?
Yes. I think they were perfect for each other in some twisted, sick way. And that's why I don't think that Sid killed her.
And so what's your take on what happened that night?
Nobody knows who did it. There's a few... are sure that Sid did it. I don't think Sid did it. He's not that, he's weak. He was too weak to do that. I know that she had gotten her drugs and gave the money to Rocket's Red Glare. And I know that he was over there that night. That's all I know.
Real name Michael Morra, Rockets was an actor, stand-up comedian and part-time drug dealer who was acting as bodyguard for Sid. He told police and the press that Nancy called him and asked him to bring drugs to the Chelsea hotel that night. Deborah told us many people wondered if Rockets was involved in Nancy's death, but we can't talk to him because he died in 2001.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you, too.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. You are so pretty. You're lucky it's not 30 years ago.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I was talking about her.
No, I know.
I feel like we're getting to know Nancy and the counterculture world she inhabited. Julia says I'm normcore, which I think is a nice way of saying boring. So she thought it might help for me to get into the punk mindset. That's psychology, apparently.
So punk is just wearing whatever the hell you want, right?
A lot of it's about nonconformity, so it's about specifically breaking what's normal and challenging hierarchies, challenging gender, like that. It's challenging gender conformity norms.
What do you think of this?
I think it's kind of amazing.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you reckon I can pull it off?
No, but it is amazing. Okay.
You ready?
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
I quite like this jumper, and I quite like the mask for private stuff.
You look pretty punk.
Thank you. What stance are you supposed to have for that?
Nailing it, yeah.
So why do you think it is that women want to sleep with guys like me with this bad boy image?
Like, there's a huge psychological element, right, to punk and being like, we're going to break the system. And so when groupies show up, what they're trying to do is they're trying to attach themselves to people who are breaking down systems that don't work for them. So people like Nancy, who was having severe mental health issues, and she's drawn to this space where people are just intentionally trying to break the system. And the system isn't just music, it's society, it's hierarchies, it's fashion.
So it's just you sort of fall out of society, if you like, and then there's this sort of group of people where everyone's accepted, and then everyone's just going sort of fuck everything, and that's very alluring.
I don't think it's that they fall out of society. I think it's that society has failed them. The system doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for my friends, and we're trying to break it and make something new. And even if that something new is just sort of an island of anarchy, this is ours.
I feel like I had a pretty good understanding of Nancy and her relationship with Sid, and although it was volatile, at this point, I couldn't see a motive for murder. So next, we needed to look at what happened after the Sex Pistols got to America. As the Sex Pistols embarked on their US tour, there was rising tension within the band. Sid was angry with the rest of the group for refusing to let Nancy join the tour. He was also forced into heroin withdrawal. He got into fights with members of the audience. At one gig, he hit someone with his bass. Within 2 weeks, the band had split. In August, Sid and Nancy moved to Manhattan, living in the Chelsea Hotel, where, 3 months later, Nancy would die.
This is the legendary spot in New York. At various times it was home to people like Leonard Cohen, Dee Dee Ramone, Edith Piaf, Madonna, Stanley Kubrick, Bob Dylan, and Andy Warhol. Musicians, artists, people who were trying to make it and people already had. And people could do things like swap art for rent if they couldn't make the rent.
And then so, it's a hotel, but people just lived here?
Yeah.
One of my friends had a similar situation, sort of separated from his wife, and he lived in a travel lodge at Three Bridges for 2 weeks. So, Sex Pistols are split up.
Yeah.
Nancy takes over Sid Vicious's career.
She's trying to help him start a solo career, really, but they're both heavy users. And so they're taking lots of drugs in this hotel. There's lots of other drug users in the space as well. And they were living in room 100 just down there.
So, are we allowed to go and have a look around the room?
They've told us that we can't film inside. I think they're trying to shake their reputation for being like the spot where one thing happened, because lots of interesting artists live here.
Right.
So I think we should just leave it.
Well, I just think we're here. We're not come to look at the outside of the building.
It's been redecorated anyway.
Yeah, but you still get a feel for it.
Yeah, but
I'm going to go and ask them if we can film.
I don't think they're going to let you.
Well, I'm just going to say it's like journalistic, it's an investigation. It's an area of public interest, we should be allowed in.
I think we should give them their peas.
Am I jaywalking now?
Yeah, you are.
OK.
Maybe you shouldn't be.
Just got to wait for it to be safe.
There's no way.
Morning.
That was quick.
The guy opened the door and said morning, and I shat myself.
Any clues?
I've got some clues about my own character, yeah. Turns out I've got absolutely no bottle whatsoever, but yeah, they've got like a foyer with some like chairs and a couple of tables on the left-hand side.
Okay.
And then they've got like a reception desk where you check in.
So a hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what have you learnt from standing out here? It's good to see it from the outside, though.
I think
that's
so.
all we've come here for.
I think it's
Can't even see the actual room, because that's one back, but still good.
We needed to talk to people who interacted with Sid and Nancy in the Chelsea Hotel on the night she died. One person who was definitely in their room, Rocket's Red Glare, was now deceased, but we'd heard there were more. So we did some in-depth research. Well, Julia did, and found musician Neon Leon.
I find it kind of hard to believe he loved her more than he loved his music.
Hello, Neon Leon.
Hi, Ramesh.
This is Dr. Julia Shaw.
Hi, Doctor. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
At 28 years old, Neon lived on the first floor, down the corridor from Sid and Nancy.
So we were looking into this whole case of Sid and Nancy and what happened that night. And Nancy, it felt like when you look at all of the press around that time, the portrayal of her was quite negative, and she was kind of felt like a lot of the press was sort of demonising her. And you were good friends with her, right?
Yes, I knew her from Philadelphia. I didn't see her as some evil vixen. She was a very giving and intelligent person. She was no dummy. She would look after her friends and things like this. She was not some asshole person. She would say, oh, Neon, you want to go see Aerosmith? I got some passes from Steve Tarver. Okay. And, wow.
So if we zoom in on the night that Nancy died, so what happened as far as you remember the evening of Nancy's death?
Okay, on that night, Sid and Nancy came to my flat. Nancy, she brought a knife with her and said, look, what I bought Sid. She says, you want to touch it? I said, no, I'm not into knives.
So they knocked on the door, and so around what time?
After 9. Maybe they were there for an hour.
So they left around 10, 11 o'clock, right?
Yeah, somewhere around. And then later on, the phone rang, and it was Nancy. And she says, hey, Leon, do you have a joint for me? No. How's Sid? Oh, he's useless. He's taken so much pills, he's totally out of it. He's unconscious, and there was someone talking in the background. I don't know who, but I could hear another voice. It was not Sid.
So Sid's passed out, but there's someone else in the room who's not Sid.
That's correct. The next day, there's a knock on my door, and I open the door, and it's like reporters, TV crews, and then here comes these two detectives, and there's Nancy being taken out in a body bag and put into the morgue.
Neon discovered Nancy had been stabbed in the bedroom sometime between 6 and 7 a.m. Blood had soaked into the bed. When the police entered room 100 at 11 a.m, they found her in the bathroom. She'd been dead for at least an hour.
That must have been awful.
Yeah, it was, and it got more and more awful as time went by.
So did the police consider you a suspect?
Yes, but it didn't last long. That lasted just a few days.
Thank you so much, Neon. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
I was surprised to hear Nancy bought Sid a knife that day. Neon told us that, like spikes and chains, knives became a feature of the punk aesthetic. Photographer Pierre Bernard captured these candid pictures of Sid and Nancy. He said that what now looks pretty sinister at the time seemed like a game, and there was nothing violent about it. But Sid was also photographed with self-inflicted cuts. I find these images pretty shocking. And this was just days before the Sex Pistols split up. So we wanted to understand Sid's state of mind in the weeks leading up to Nancy's death. He was hanging out in New York's punk bars, occasionally playing gigs. Nancy had taken over his career.
You're Sid's manager, right?
Yeah.
What kind of role do you play in this?
I arrange recording, I arrange gigs, I arrange the publicity, I talk to the club owners, to the people at the record company, to the people in newspapers, magazines, things like that.
Julia found someone we could talk to who was at the epicenter of that scene.
Hello, I'm John.
So nice to meet you.
John Holstrom founded Punk magazine and designed covers for the Ramones.
Oh, welcome to the Bowery. This was the Isle of Lost Souls, where all the bums hung out. This neighborhood was dangerous. There were street prostitutes and drug dealers. And then this little bar here opened up called CBGB's. Yeah, you see the black awning? That used to be a white awning like the one next to it. Patti Smith played there, and all these other bands started playing here. And before you know it, it just became a big scene. I felt like I was at the Cavern Club watching the Beatles before they were famous. This is the original location for Max's Kansas City. It even says Max on the sign. Now, Sid Vicious played here, famously, some of his last shows. But I didn't bother to go, because people would go there hoping he would overdose on heroin in front of them. Or, you know, he'd be all so junked out he couldn't perform. Like, some people like that. That's entertaining to them, not to me.
It's like a form of disaster tourism.
Yes. It's a great analogy.
I actually made that up. I made that up.
You did?
No, we didn't.
I coined it 95.
John followed the Sex Pistols on their infamous 1978 tour.
The first time I saw them, they were very subdued. It was just like a regular rock and roll band, so I was not impressed. But then the next show was Randy's Rodeo, where the audience wanted to kill them. They were provoking the audience, and the audience was hitting back. It was like a heavyweight fight. It was one of it was the most amazing show I'd ever seen.
So what was Sid Vicious like on stage?
Very inconsistent. Sometimes he'd just sit there and pluck away at the bass. And then in a place like Dallas, he had groupies in the front, and they ended up headbutting him. So he's bleeding on his nose, and he's covered in blood, and he's scarred up, and people loved it.
And what was Sid actually like? Because some people say he's a very timid guy, kind of being told what to do by Nancy, but then there's also these incidents of extreme violence.
Well, whenever I met him, he was very pleasant, almost childlike. I met him several times, but he'd never remember you the next day. He was so out of it. And he was dope sick, and hard drugs really changed a person's personality, I think. And you'd see this common thread of people who were kind of lost souls, you know.
After the Sex Pistols split, a documentary crew struggled to film an interview with the barely conscious Sid, while Nancy tried to assist them.
What was it that you thought the pistol were trying to do? Was it just like really kick the establishment up the arse? Sid?
Sid, he's not interviewing me. Please try and wake up. Do you want me to make you a cup of coffee?
Yeah, could you?
Yes, I'll make you a cup of coffee. But will you try and fucking wake up, please?
This is how Neon Leon said Nancy described Sid on the night of her death. Completely out of it.
That's what a lot of addicts have to do. They have to fill up that unhappiness and numb themselves emotionally.
So do you feel like these incidents of violence and his crazy behaviour, do you put that almost entirely down to drugs?
I don't really know, but, you know, he famously attacked Nick Kent, the music journalist. I think he hit him with some chains.
What was that fight all about?
Somebody started on a friend of mine, so I whacked him in the face with a belt.
Did you win?
Of course we won.
All right. How about that girl that punched you in the nose in Texas? Did you really spit the blood back in her face?
Of course.
He had a violent streak, very unpredictable.
And was he ever a danger to himself?
Yeah, I think Sid was mostly a danger to himself.
Sid would have died 15 deaths if I hadn't been around. Because that's just, you know, the way he is. I mean, he's not, this is what he does when he's not with me.
Do you think he did it?
I'm leaning towards thinking Sid killed Nancy.
One of the arguments that's put forward for Sid not having done it is that he was completely out of it and there's no way that he could have possibly done it.
Right. And I believed that for many years. But then testimony by hotel employees who swore that Sid was walking around the hotel hallways at 5 in the morning.
So he's walking around, so he's not comatose.
No.
The only part of this that makes you think maybe someone else did it was that Nancy had a lot of money on the dresser and it was all gone when the police arrived. It's one of those mysteries. We don't have enough mystery in our life.
I know, but the point of this show is we're trying to solve it. That's a slight issue we've got, so...
So how are you feeling about the case so far?
The thing is, we're trying to get a clearer picture of what happened. But as we try and clear the picture, it feels like the picture is sort of getting more and more unclear. In many ways, I feel like the picture is less clear than we started looking at the picture.
What are you going to do to clear it up?
I think we need to go and sort of talk to some people who are there. Hopefully they can help make the picture a little bit clearer. And we can sort of come out of that with a much clearer picture of what happened.
But about that money John mentioned, several witnesses told the police or the press that Sid and Nancy had a bag of cash in the room that night, at least $1,000, which was gone the next morning. So could Nancy's death have been a robbery gone wrong? We needed to start separating the facts from the rumours, myths and opinions. And I had a plan.
So what I thought was we could just use this space to figure out what happened.
Okay.
So we can get our heads around the timeline. So I thought this could be a visual representation. That's the dividing wall between the bathroom and the room, right?
Okay.
That's the far wall of the bathroom.
Okay, sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, fine.
It's not going to be to scale. It's just going to be using my eye, but to give you some confidence, I'm using my good one.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, keep going, keep going, keep going. Stop.
Now, I've got these to represent people.
Nice.
We're going to use that to represent the key participants in the case. Sid.
Yep.
Nancy. Yeah. Then I'm going to do rockets. Neon. Leon.
And these are the police.
Yeah. Hey, we're stopping and searching for no legitimate reason. OK. There we go. What do you think, Julia, of this setup?
Perfect.
Huh?
Perfect.
OK. We've forgotten one really important character in this whole bag of money.
Nice.
Thank you. OK.
Should we do a drugs one?
I've actually bought real stuff for that. No, I'm joking. Yeah, we can do. OK, so we've got our room. We've got our characters. What's the first thing we know from that night?
First thing, Nancy and Sid leave Neon Leon's room and return to their hotel room. And then they crash into the bed, is how I'm picturing it, but we don't know that that's what happened.
OK, well, let's just put them in the room for now.
OK.
We don't want to hypothesise, do we, Julia? That's not how investigations work.
So at 2:30, Rocket's Red Glare says that he gets a call from Nancy begging for some drugs.
So 3:15, got him in the room, Nancy, Rockets and Sid at 3:15.
Right. So Rocket says that he sees Nancy go to her bag, and there's sort of 50s and 100s just spilling out of her bag.
So what we know is that there's a bag with a substantial amount of cash in it, right?
Yeah.
So apparently at 4 a.m, Neon Leon got a phone call from Nancy saying that they were completely high on Tumanols and Sid was just completely out of it.
One of the arguments against Sid having stabbed Nancy is that with the amount of Tuinol he'd taken, he would have been passed out. But John told us Sid was reportedly roaming the halls of the Chelsea Hotel. So before we could finish our Skittle reconstruction, we needed more info.
There is someone who has some information, apparently, who I've been trying to get a hold of, who has something that will help us.
And did you know about this before I taped out the hotel room and bought a set of wooden Skittles?
Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
Julia took me to see Anne Bardak, a renowned news journalist.
Very nice.
Yeah, this is my office. This is Johnny Rotten, or John Lydon he became.
Sorry, are these, whose legs are these?
They're mine. I can tell you nothing went beyond that.
Okay.
Nothing.
No, I wasn't insinuating.
In the 70s, Anne was a regular on the New York punk scene. Her career began with an interview series called Punks and Bad Boys, and she knew people living in the Chelsea Hotel.
There were some old-timers in the Chelsea that would the cultural milieu of the living theater. an avant-garde theater group started in the 50s and 60s. The Chelsea Hotel was very much headquarters for a lot of older bohemian types, but the younger people were the punks.
On the day Nancy died, Anne went to the Chelsea to interview witnesses and created a timeline of events.
How many people do you think you spoke with at the hotel?
I think I went door to door, room to room. I had my little tape recorder, and I just said, tell me what you saw and heard. Tell me what you saw and heard.
What time was Rockets in the room, according to your timeline?
Rocket says that he arrived at the Chelsea at 3:15 a.m. He's saying that he was in the room for roughly 2 hours.
OK, so if Rockets is in the room between 3 and 5, that could be the voice that Neon Leon heard at 4 a.m.
Yeah, could be.
I'm so good at this. One of the things it said is that Sid was so completely out of it that it couldn't possibly have been him. Like, he was barely conscious, so it couldn't have been him that did it.
I don't think so. This is what Kenny the bellhop said on record. He went up because Sid Vicious is banging on everybody's door. Kenny goes upstairs and he finds this very unruly, noisy Sid Vicious. He went to hit me.
So Sid tries to hit
the bellboy. He went at me again, so I hit him and I kept pounding him till he went down to the floor. He had a bloodied mouth. There was blood all over his face and t-shirt, recalls Kenny. I don't know if he went to his room. When I got back to the front desk, it was 5:15.
So if the bellboy sees Sid Vicious trying to hit him, he's obviously not too out of it to do anything.
Exactly. Let me tell you my own personal view. This was a really, really troubled soul. She could be aggressive and obnoxious. They were on massive amounts of narcotics. She bought him a knife, and they played with knives. And I think this is a narcotic death with a stab wound. This is completely, it made perfect sense to me.
So you're saying the most parsimonious answer is probably the right one here?
Absolutely.
What does parsimonious mean?
Oh, the simplest answer. That simple answer.
OK. Well, use the simplest word. OK, so what have we learned?
Well, Anne said that Rockets was in the room between about 3:15 and 5 a.m. And Sid was just passed out.
Yes, but Sid is up and fighting a bellboy between 5 and 5:30 a.m.
Yeah.
So all of this talk about Sid was too out of it to have done anything, I mean, that completely contradicts that, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I've got a hold of transcripts from the grand jury trial.
There's a trial?
Well, a grand jury trial.
Which is what?
When you decide whether there's enough evidence to prosecute.
Yeah, no, I just wanted it confirmed.
This transcript has Sid's confession to the police.
So Sid actually just confessed it?
Well, he made a confession. It says here he told the first police officers he didn't know what happened. Then it says he spoke to detectives and denied stabbing her, but then later he confesses. A police officer said that Sid made an informal confession to him, saying, in quotes, "I stabbed her, but I didn't mean to kill her. I loved her, but she treated me like shit."
Was that recorded anywhere?
Well, it wasn't recorded, and there was no lawyer present, so there was no official statement. This was apparently said to the police officer, and then the police officer wrote it down. But Sid never came in and did a formal confession, didn't sign a confession, which are the normal steps that you would then take from that point.
OK, but so is that reliable evidence?
It's evidence. It's not very good evidence, but it's evidence.
Well, I just don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, every time we get a new detail, I get more confused, to be honest.
Yeah, fair. It also says that Sid told police detectives that when he woke up, Nancy was in the bathroom. She'd been stabbed, but she was still breathing. Then he says he left and went out to get methadone.
For whatever reason, maybe it was shock or maybe it was guilt that he didn't go and get help when he could and probably should have. Arguably, he could have saved her. That is a difficult thing to contemplate. The fact that the death was so tragic does make you want to just really find out exactly what happened. And it could be that it's the simple explanation that they were both high on drugs and Sid did it, but I still have niggling questions. There's things that are unanswered, like, for example, the missing bag of money. What was that all about?
Just when we thought we'd run out of leads, we were contacted by a mystery informant. It made me feel like I was in a proper New York cop drama, so we arranged to meet him on a dodgy-looking street corner on the wrong side of the tracks. Well, it was on a side of the tracks.
Hey, Jesse Pollock, how are you?
Oh, hello, mate. Ramesh. How are you?
Hi. You guys want to walk?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So, Jesse, what is your connection to all of this?
Well, I've been working on a book about this case for about the past 5 years now.
Right. And what drew you to it?
I was a fan first. As I grew older and I became a true crime journalist, I always found the unanswered questions in the Sid and Nancy case really compelling. And then the more I dug, I really realized everything people think they know about this case isn't true. So it's been pretty eye-opening.
So here's my question.
Sure.
Do you think you have solved this case?
I'm not arrogant enough to say that, but I think I've come closer than other people.
Okay. I take that to mean yes.
Sure.
The thing that people consistently say is that the police didn't bother to investigate it at all. They had their murderer in Sid. He was a junkie and his girlfriend died, and so they didn't bother to investigate it properly. Is that the case?
I thought that was the case. I was shocked to find out no. They actually did a pretty diligent job working behind the scenes into not just one suspect, there were at the very least 3. So when I got hold of the original case file from the NYPD, I was pretty shocked.
Hold on. You've got the actual case file?
Oh yeah, I got it right here.
And then you've printed it out and put it in nice little folders for us. Thank you, Jesse.
Well, it's the BBC.
Yeah, no, good.
You have to bring your A game here.
Yeah. Well, not so much nowadays, but all good.
This is the state of room 100 that morning. As you can see, the room is a total mess. There's blood stains on the mattress. The sheets are all torn up. It was a total pig pen of a crime scene. And here we've got the crime scene diagram of where Nancy's single knife wound was. It's about 1 inch below her navel, which not very common in stabbing murders. You know, usually a crime of passion, they're riddled with wounds. This is just one small, clean wound below her belly button.
So you said they looked into 3 suspects?
Yeah, well, there's 3 suspects in addition to Sid.
Oh.
Very briefly, they considered Neon Leon a suspect, but they cleared Leon as a suspect almost immediately. Rocket's red glare. They interviewed him on October 20th, and he told them there was a significant amount of money in that room. And that is a common thread in the case file. The cops, when they first arrested Sid, they thought they had their man, and then as time went on, they found out, oh, no, there were other people in that room, and there's a ton of money missing. Knife, hypodermic needles, clothing, blood samples, other personal property found at the scene, no mention of money. Okay. So there was a robbery. Were they robbed by the person who killed Nancy? Who knows? But the money was gone the next morning.
Okay, so does this statement from Rockets, does this clear things up? Does it exonerate him?
I think it does. To put myself in his shoes, if I had killed her and made off with the money in the room and I knew that the cops had arrested someone else for it, I wouldn't be volunteering to sit down with the FBI and say, no, let me tell you, Sid didn't do it. But they interviewed this guy for nearly 9 hours, and that's where another shady character comes into the story, a Tuinol and Quaalude dealer known as Steve C. White guy, early 20s, longish hair. At least 3 people saw a man matching that description, going into room 100, leaving room 100, and sitting in room 100 that night. But Steve C., once he was interviewed by the police, he denied ever setting foot in the Chelsea that night and said, oh no, yeah, I saw them that night, but no, they came to my place, which we have no evidence of whatsoever.
That's a bad look for him, right?
Not a good one, no. They took this guy seriously as a suspect.
Do you think that someone killed Nancy for the money?
That is the clearest motive that I can think of. The money was there, then it wasn't. This person tries taking the money. She sees it, tries to stop him. A fight ensued. Quick stab to the gut, flees the room.
And do you think that was Steve C.?
I mean, when the NYPD interviewed Steve C., note at the bottom here, it says case active. Every other suspect or person of interest they talked to in this case, their interview notes are all say case closed, meaning, all right, we've ruled this person out through an interview.
The way you're presenting it sounds obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And the police had him on their radar. Why didn't they press charges?
I think without any hardcore physical evidence linking him to it, like fingerprints, clothing fibers, a confession, they hit kind of a brick wall. After he was interrogated by the police, no one I interviewed said they saw him again after that, so the trail kind of goes cold. He could still be out there. And then not too long after that, Sid's dead. So suddenly the case is just poof, gone. For some reason, after Sid dies, the NYPD just decides, case closed, nothing we can do here. Sorry, bud.
No, it's okay.
After his arrest, Sid's record company, Virgin Records, put up $50,000 for his bail. 3 weeks later, Sid got into a fight with Patti Smith's brother and was thrown back in jail. In January 1979, detoxed from heroin, he was released on bail for a second time. He was interviewed by a BBC journalist.
And what do you think made it happen? It was mental. Nancy always said she died before she was 21. Where would you like to be? Under the ground. Are you serious? What are you?
5 weeks after this interview, Sid died of a heroin overdose. There was ongoing speculation over whether he overdosed deliberately or because his tolerance was low after detox. With Ann Bardak's timeline and Jesse's access to the police file, we had all the evidence we needed to complete our reconstruction.
So Sid is crashed out on the bed, passed out. So apparently at 4 a.m, Neon Leon got a phone call from Nancy.
He's taken so much pills, he's totally out of it. He's unconscious.
Yeah, and he said he could hear another male voice in the room, but it wasn't a British voice, so it couldn't have been Sid, right?
Could have been Rockets.
Could have been Rockets, because Rockets didn't leave till 5. So Rockets said that he stopped at the front desk to make a phone call, and he saw Stephen C., who was Sid and Nancy's dealer.
Mr. S.
Mr. S. turning the corner and entering the elevator.
At least 3 people saw a man matching that description, going into room 100, leaving room 100, and sitting in room 100 that night.
Yeah, so Steve C. was interviewed as a suspect. Witnesses placed him at the hotel that night, but he denied being there. And there was insufficient evidence that he was involved, so the police never pressed charges.
Yeah.
Kenny the bellhop
sees Sid in the hallway just being Larry, and they have a massive fight. Oh, you motherfucker!
Now, police believe, apparently, that Nancy would have been stabbed between 6 and 7 and died somewhere between 8 and 10.
So we think she was stabbed in the bed because there's blood on the bedding. And then somehow she makes it over to the bathroom and she ends up dying here on the floor.
And so whether she walks herself or somebody brings her here is unclear.
So Sid claims that he woke up
to find Nancy bleeding,
but breathing, and then, for some reason, went off to get himself some methadone.
So either he judged the situation as not that bad, and or he thought, I need to get sober to deal with the situation.
Possibly, yeah.
Or he did it and he wanted to get out.
Yeah. At 10 a.m, the desk receives a phone call from Sid saying there's somebody who's sick and we need some help.
The police and an ambulance arrive and they knock on the door, come in, and they find Nancy in the bathroom. And at this point, she's already died.
And the cash is gone. Well, we've done all of this now, and I've got to be honest, I'm still completely confused. I think the biggest problem for me is that we still don't really know what Sid was actually like. You listen to some people and they say that he was unpredictable, vicious by name and nature. And then there's other people that say he was like a kitten and he could never have done it. I think that no matter how long you look at it, that is the mystery that we're never really going to solve. With all avenues of investigation exhausted,
the BBC refused to fund another night in a New York hotel or pay for the nuts I ate from the minibar.
I came into this thinking it's the simplest explanation. He was there, it must have been him. But I'm more doubtful that it was Sid than I was before we started the investigation. Got this bag of money that went missing, and the fact that Steve C denied being there at all when a couple of people had placed him there, and the fact he sort of disappeared, I think those sort of things have made me think he's a person of interest. So look, I'm not saying that I don't think it was Sid, but I'm saying that I'm less convinced it was than when we started this whole thing.
I think that Sid probably stabbed her. Probably because he was really high and it was sort of an accident. Not to excuse it, but I think contextually it's unlikely from all that we've heard that he wanted to kill her, I think.
I think the fact that the case was just left kind of unanswered, you can't help feeling that sort of Nancy's been a little bit let down in all of this.
Yeah, they've definitely failed her. When we look at her actual life, she had such a hard life, and she was struggling with mental health issues. She was struggling with substance use. She was a teenager for most of it. She was a kid.
Yeah,
and yet people say, you know, oh, somehow she's to blame for what happened to her, which is horrible.
I think that Nancy was a very troubled person in a time that wasn't very good at dealing with troubled people. You boil it down to its basic elements, and Nancy was looking for some sort of comfort, identity, some sort of home, and that search led her turning to drugs, and she became an addict. Whatever you think about her and her impact on Sid Vicious doesn't change the fact that this is a tragically sad story about a young woman who lost her life way too soon.
Buồn ơi, đã xin chào mi khi người yêu đã bỏ ta đi. Buồn ơi, đã xin chào mi khi tình yêu chớp cánh bay đi. Buồn ơi, ta đang lẻ loi. Buồn ơi, ta đang đơn côi. Buồn ơi, hãy đến bên ta để quên chuyện tình xót xa. Nếu trên đường tình ta lẻ loi một mình. Bằng kiếm. Ta xin chào mi. Trong tâm vây đã không còn tới khi vắng em trong đời. Tìm đến chân trời mới vẫn chung một thời, giờ đã xa ngàn khơi. Ngày đó ta lầm lỡ bỏ mặc nhau hững hờ, để tiếng yêu rạng vỡ rồi thời gian xóa mờ. Mãi vô tình đến bây giờ nhận ra hai đứa không còn nhau. Cuộc sống luôn vội vã với bao nghiệt ngã số cuốn ta miệt mài. Một bước chân trượt ngã đã trôi thật dài, lạc mất nhau ngày mai. Còn mãi không trời đó mình gặp nhau lúc đầu, ngày tháng hoa mong đó cùng niềm vui nỗi sầu sẽ ghi lại biết bao điều để nhớ một thời ta đã yêu. Thì thôi ta đã lỡ lìa xa bên bờ, đời lênh đênh sóng phố buồn trôi lững lờ, còn mình trong nỗi nhớ cho đến bao giờ mình mới quên ngày xưa. Thì thôi ta đã hết chờ nhau sẽ về, mùa xuân này đã chết vàng phai não nề, để lại bao mối tim ghi khắc tên người gọi mãi trong đêm buồn. Hạnh phúc trong tầm với khi đó đã không còn tới khi vắng em trong đời. Từng đến chân trời mới vẫn thương một thời, giờ đã xa ngàn khơi. Ngày đó ta lầm lỡ bỏ mặc nhau hững hờ, để tiếng yêu ràn vỡ rồi thời gian xóa mờ. Mãi vô tình đến bây giờ chuyện ra hai đứa không còn nhau. Thì thôi ta đã hết chờ nhau sẽ về, mùa xuân này đã chết vàng phai não nề, để lại bao hối tiếc ký khắc tên người gọi mãi trong đêm buồn. Cuộc sống luôn vội vã với bao nghịch ngã số cuốn ta miệt mài. Một bước chân trượt ngã đã trôi thật dài, lạc mất nhau ngày mai. Còn mãi không trời đó mình gặp nhau lúc đầu, ngày tháng hoa mong đó cùng niềm vui nỗi sầu sẽ ghi lại biết bao điều để nhớ một thời ta đã yêu. Thì thôi ta đã lỡ lìa xa bên bờ, đời lênh đênh sóng phố buồn trôi lững lờ, còn mình trong nỗi nhớ cho đến bao giờ mình mới quên ngày xưa. Thì thôi ta đã hết chờ nhau sẽ về, mùa xuân này đã chết vàng phai não nề, để lại bao hối tiếc ghi khắc tên người gọi mãi trong đêm buồn.